The MAGA group got behind this idea of no more like forever wars, right? A lot of people onto Trump, even independent voters, latched onto this idea of a guy like Trump going in, changing the system. So now you see a lot of voters who feel a little betrayed by it now that we're getting into this conflict in Iran.
Where does the fundamental right to vote derive? If we admit that the primary election matters, how are we going to say, oh, because you registered with this party or that party, you can or cannot vote?
There's actually like 3 or 4 bills in Congress, but they're very extreme, the federal ones, whereas the California one is pretty reasonable, and they're both going to all get painted with the same brush. People are just going to be either against voter ID or for voter ID, and there's nuances to it.
IVP has done polling on this, polled LA County voters, showing that over 60% of county vote or independents would support a system of a nonpartisan primary advancing 5 candidates to the general election using ranked choice voting.
All right, welcome back, everybody, to the Independent Voter Podcast. A lot going on. We had some elections in Texas. We have a war going on the other side of the world. We have Kara in the cold on the East Coast, Sean in Chicago, and Ethan in a dungeon. And let's just jump right into it today. I mean, Texas had a big night last night, and there's still fallout and stuff going on. So what do you guys, Sean, what do you make of this situation going on in Dallas?
Yeah, so in Dallas County, there was an incident last night where, because of a last-minute decision by the GOP to want precinct-based voting as opposed to county-wide voting, voters in Texas over the last couple of years have been used to a system where in the primary elections, they could go to pretty much any voting location in their county and be able to cast a ballot. Now, that was a rule that changed a few years ago. It hasn't always been that case, but this year, right before the primaries, the GOP wanted to move to precinct-based voting. This was initially based off some, conspiracy theories about voting machines and mistrust towards voting machines and wanting to do hand counting. But then the party realized that doing hand counts would be too expensive.
You loaded that with an adjective, the conspiracy theory, you could say, a perspective. Claims.
There's Chad. He's playing devil's advocate again.
So, yeah, that's a fair point.
Possible but unlikely narrative.
Yeah. So even though the GOP didn't want to do hand counting anymore, they still did precinct-based voting, which means that voters had to go to a specific voting location in order to vote.
And so tell me just real quick, let me just interrupt you. They were used to this new system, or they weren't used to this new system? Like, how long were they? They were always like, if they want to go to the county building, even if they live not in that precinct, they couldn't go to the county building to vote last night?
It wasn't always the case. This has been in place for a couple of years now. And so reading reports, some election administrators were saying as many as a third of voters were confused. They were in the wrong place. They had to be directed to another location to vote just because they were so used to being able to go wherever they wanted in their county. And there's the added elements of redistricting that just happened in Texas that also added to the confusion. And so anyway, a Dallas County judge ordered 2 extra hours of voting. But then Ken Paxton, the Attorney General, asked the state Supreme Court to pause that ruling. And the state Supreme Court did. And
wait. The Attorney General, after a judge said, we're just going to have it stay open for 2 more hours just to make sure that everybody has the right to vote, because it's totally understandable that some people might be confused and go to the wrong place. So like if they got there by 7, then they could still go to the other place where they're supposed to go, like find out.
Which, and then is it a shock then you have the other conspiracy theorists to say this last minute change was on purpose, and that you have an attorney general meddling in his own election, right? So, I mean, that's how these things stand up on both sides. It's like, well, this is funny over here. Well, that's kind of funny over here. And you only believe what other narrative if you're like kind of rooting for one side or the other.
No, there still are facts in this world, Chad Peace. There
I would
still
tend
are
to agree.
people.
So, well, and to Jasmine Crockett thinks it's a conspiracy against her campaign. The Democrats think Paxton did this intentionally, and the GOP tried to confuse Democratic voters in order to suppress the vote. So it's there. Yeah, there's a lot of claims of conspiracy theories, and I will admit that I used that word a little fast and loose earlier, or that term a little fast and loose earlier. But so now,
why can't we just call them theories?
Well,
great question.
Well,
Very
because
metaphysical. You're getting very metaphysical this morning.
Right. Well, I mean, there's some scientific
I'm a
reasons.
philosophy minor.
That's cool. I hear you over there.
Well, isn't a theory can never be proved or disproved. A theory can only be, supported or unsupported. There are real facts in this type of situation where we can say, okay, this did not happen. Therefore, a theory would not be supported at all by the facts.
Then don't call it a conspiracy theory.
Okay.
And so actually, theories can be proven. I also have an economics major. They're theories.
What do you mean theories?
Then they get proven. Why?
Theories
it's a theory.
It's only supported.
The whole point of a theory is to try to prove or disprove it.
Right, but it's never. I mean, no one can say like, okay, the Big Bang Theory is proven. It's just the most highly substantiated.
Not proven
theory.
Yet. Yeah.
There you go.
Well,
it's not what I learned in science, but okay.
It's just like we have the theory. It's just like we have the theory of gravity, right? Like we can't prove gravity, but there's a lot of empirical evidence to support the basis for gravity.
That's my understanding.
Anyway, my theory is that 2 + 2 = 4.
There you go.
All right.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, if you framed it as a theory. But anyways,
back to Texas.
So wait, so Texas, I have one question.
Yes.
Just to, or a clarifying query. You're allowed to pick up any ballot that you want. You could just go there. You're just a person in Texas. You don't have to be a registered Democrat. You don't have to be a registered Republican. You don't have to be a registered anything. You go to the polls and you say, I want a Democratic ballot or a Republican ballot.
Yes.
Yes?
Yeah, Texas doesn't register voters by party. So, yeah.
It's very cool in a way,
they have
right?
an open system where you could choose, when you go to the polls, you choose between a Republican or a Democratic ballot. It doesn't matter who you are. Now, the Republican Party is now trying to close their primaries. They voted on this a couple of times to close their primaries. They've sued the state to do it. They've challenged their own Secretary of State on this to try to close it. Ken Paxton, again, part of this conversation, has chosen to side with the political party here instead of state law, and has actually joined in their lawsuit against his own state.
We wrote about that in Independent Voter News.
We did.
Right. I mean, this is the whole thing. I mean, Texas has a history of not registering your party, which I say is a pretty, more conservative position of not having to tell the state who your party is. Right. And then also this goes to the core of the arguments that the Independent Voter Project has made. Is like, where does the fundamental right to vote derive? If we admit that the primary election matters, how are we going to say, oh, because you registered with this party or that party, you can or cannot vote? Now, the Ken Paxtons of the world will say, well, that's because the primaries, they serve our parties. The purpose is to elect a nominee. Well, Mr. Ken Paxton, you're the Attorney General. Okay, so explain to me why the taxpayers of Texas have to pay for your private organization. That sounds like big government to me, Mr. Paxton. But
you mean what if he wants to change it? Because right now, anybody can go, and as long as you're a registered voter in the beautiful state of Texas, you're registered, you show up, as long as you're in the right precinct, not just go into the county building in Dallas, don't try to do that, you're going to get to vote, and you get to choose. So my bigger question is, how many people chose this Talarico? Like, that means a ton of people are getting to participate who are independents, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Tons.
so I mean, there's
they can choose. So I wonder what the
I've read some reports
there.
that Talarico is kind of popular with independents, which is why I think that Democrats see an opportunity here with him, especially if, say, Paxton goes on to the runoff and beats Cornyn, which I predict he'll do in a lower turnout runoff.
I mean, after the whole Colbert thing, he got so much national coverage, it would be hard to say. I mean, I think a lot of people outside of Texas know.
The funny thing about that Colbert interview is more people ended up watching it as a result of it being on YouTube, as opposed to...
And then they got to hear Talarico's message, which is really inspiring, and very much independent.
Which my conspiracy theory is this was all manufactured and done on purpose so that you would pay attention to Talarico.
I really, really, really
Granted, Ethan, it's not proven,
have been.
but it's a theory.
I have been paying attention.
Yeah. So right
to
now,
him.
Talarico has the majority, which means that it would not go to a runoff. That means Talarico would go straight to the general election, and we would just have to wait to see how the Republican runoff goes. But like I said, this reminds me of 2012 when Ted Cruz was going up against then Lieutenant Governor David Dewhurst. This was the first long-form piece I wrote on IVN, was breaking down the analysis of this race and the voter turnout. And initially, David Dewhurst, a more moderate Republican, won the primary, but he did not win it by enough to avoid a runoff against Cruz, who was then able to mobilize his base in a lower turnout runoff and was able to win with.
And he's been senator ever since, right?
Yeah,
I mean, he's
with less
still
than
there.
4% of the voting population in Texas. This was back when Texas wasn't considered in play for the Democrats. It was still considered very safe for Republicans.
Yeah, I'm just saying this highlights why elections are so state specific, and when you try to go to reform, you can't just take a model from California and apply it somewhere else or any
you can't take something from the federal government and try to apply it to all the states, because the states get to choose.
Right, but from an independent voter point of view, if you believe, people should be elected when the most people participate, right? We always rail on closed primaries when you have gerrymandering, because it's like that's really when people are getting elected. Well, look at Texas. This isn't a pick on Ted Cruz, but the reality is when he got elected, he got a plurality. Well, not even a plurality, right? He was in second place.
He got second place, yeah. So he didn't even get the plurality.
Yeah, he got less than a plurality in a low turnout partisan primary. Granted, it was open, right? So that allows more voters. Yep. But then he ended up winning a majority in a even lower turnout runoff, right? You have like half the turnout in the runoff, right?
Typically, the general rule is in Texas is if there is a runoff, you take the primary turnout and you cut it in half, and that's what your turnout's going to be in the runoff.
And so I think you ended up calculating there what he ended up needing, really 2% of the Texas vote.
It was about 2%. I know it was less than 4%.
Incredible.
Right, which essentially is what elected him, because and like I said, that's not Ted Cruz's fault. That's a process fault, and you see the consequence all over is the incentives have been aligned for folks to act a certain way.
Yeah, exactly. And for our audience who, you're asking, like, who is this guy? Like, who likes this person? Why are they in office? Why have they been, a cornerstone of our representation for decades? It's probably because, 4% of people in their state voted them in, and ever since then they've been able to consolidate the power. It's exactly like you're pointing out. There's these small constituencies. They're able to elect someone, and they end up having just an absolutely outsized impact on our country as a whole. And I think, at least for members of my generation, it's hard to even understand, like, how did this person really rise to prominence? And like learning that about Ted Cruz makes so much more sense to me, because there's just so much.
Otherwise, you couldn't figure it out. You couldn't wrap your head around
like,
how that guy could become. Can you imagine how hard it is to be in Texas? There's only 2 senators for every single person in Texas. Wow.
So there's a funny story from yesterday's elections, and it is you guys know about the ShamWow infomercials, those old ShamWow commercials.
How do you forget ShamWow?
Yeah. So the ShamWow guy, he's running for a Texas House seat, and
branching out.
With
the My Pillow guy.
He didn't win the primary, but he's going to sue his party. He's going to sue the GOP because they didn't put ShamWow on the ballot. That he's the ShamWow guy. They didn't put his nickname. And I think that's the funniest thing. This is real life. This is actually happening in real life. It's just crazy.
That's awesome. Well, I mean, other things happening in real life, like
Iran
across the world. Yeah. That's kind of a big deal. This is something that's like really divided the electorate too, right? Where remember, Trump kind of almost rose to power because the folks in the Freedom Caucus and stuff, which have long libertarian streaks, right? And a lot of these folks, like, they supported people like Ron Paul and Rand Paul, and so that's where you have the Tom Masseys of the world, where they're hardcore non-interventionists, right? Like, never instigate the war, right? And so you got that faction on the right, and then
wait, who is that? So, like, in real life today, that's Rand Paul and Thomas Massey only, or are there any others?
Well, I mean, there used to
I'm
be like
having
Justin
brain fart.
Amash, but he's no
Amash,
longer in
yeah,
the
he's not
House.
there.
He's gone.
Yeah, he's gone.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that libertarian wing is very small right now. And yeah, you have Massey and Rand Paul, and probably a couple of members of the Freedom Caucus could also fall into that category as
Right.
well. But yeah, it's a shrinking number.
Yeah, and then you have some folks on the left who were like the same people who thought Iraq war was great. Now all of a sudden they're looking to wait, what about the war powers and all this, right? Where people
It's not
don't
all
really...
of a sudden. I mean, this has been
right. Well, when's
23 years of debating this. 24 years.
Oh,
right?
When's the last time we declared? Like in the 40s or something?
Definitely in the 40s.
Been a while, yeah.
World War II,
But yeah, it is interesting that because Rubio talking to the press yesterday was saying, presidents have always stated that, the War Powers Act is unconstitutional. That's always been a position of the administration. Well, of course, the presidential administration would think that, but your party has also been on the opposing end of that in Congress,
exactly.
as Democrats. Both parties have, depending on who is the president. So
how can war be so partisan? Like, what the heck? If it needs to unify us, not divide us.
Yeah, well, that's what Trump would probably want, the rally around the flag effect, right? I mean, that's what generally happens when you begin conflict somewhere. That's what happens in when Russia invades Ukraine. You see a slight uptick in support for Putin, but so far I don't think that's been happening. There hasn't been. Well, they stopped tracking the approval ratings of Trump, but
Yeah, thanks, Gallup. Thank you.
Yeah,
thank you for taking away that information from the public.
Yeah, well, maybe they had their own economic reasons, but I mean,
I know you think that, but come on, they've been doing it forever, and then they just stop. Like, they shouldn't stop.
Think what I got out of this, we just asked a simple question. We tried not to load it as much as possible. We just said, should a Congress have formally declared war, right? And then I think there was thousands of comments, right? And think
there's over 2,000 comments. We asked them, should Congress formally declare war, like now? Like, should they now?
Like, proactively convene and
exactly
declare.
Yeah, but I got to look up that comment. I think it was like a guy named Robert Nolan or something. He wins the best. I don't care what.
So we had a few. The top comment, 240 likes, said from John Fellis. He said, "No, this is a limited military operation to end an illegal nuclear program that threatened the entire world." So that was at the top of the Facebook list. That doesn't necessarily mean that
most people liked.
Well, the thing about this is most people reacted to it. So that doesn't necessarily mean that it's the most agreed upon. However, there are a decent amount of likes. Personally, I think this is interesting because haven't we been claiming that the Iranian nuclear program was destroyed,
obliterated.
6-7 months ago, right?
I think
completely
they said
obliterated.
That one facility we sent down the bunker busters or whatever.
No, I'm pretty sure he's been saying we completely obliterated the entire nuclear program.
I think the word might have even been obliterated.
Well, and you've kind of heard the administration and kind of go say one thing and say another thing. They backtracked on some stuff. You've seen that's been kind of hard for this administration to suddenly justify getting involved in this type of war, especially when Trump had said that he was going to be the president of peace. He was, the MAGA group got behind this idea of no more like forever wars, right? That was one of the things that really latched a lot of people onto Trump. Even independent voters latched onto this idea of a guy like Trump going in, changing the system, and not getting us into the status quo of forever wars in the Middle East or anywhere else. So these were things that attracted voters to him, and so now
same with the vice president too. Sean.
So now you see a lot of voters who feel a little betrayed by now that we're getting into this conflict in Iran. So it's.
Well, in full disclosure, I was a big Ron Paul supporter back in the day. I loved his talking about civil liberties and stuff in my early 20s. And I've grappled this because I don't even know how I feel about this situation in Iran, which one thing I could say, like, I think as a small I independent voter, isn't it okay not to think the answer, what was the best thing to do? I don't know. I don't have all the information, and I'm coming from a more non-interventionist perspective.
That's how Congress feels.
But I think going back to my point about Robert Nolan's comment is like, can't we at least in the times of seriousness take a point to laugh? I think his comment was, let me read it. It's not a war, it's a spanking. So Eric's got several. I thought it was funny, whatever side of the aisle you're on, but like at least
it's just it's it's just like the reply. We get replies to our newsletter every week when we send them out, and this week one of our replies, where the subject line that we asked is, asking people essentially what their thoughts on John Fetterman was, and someone replied back, and we got this message just saying John Fetterman is a bitch, and like. And you kind of have to laugh at that. Yeah, it's profane and a little vulgar, but like
it doesn't exactly follow our etiquette. But it's like, can't we just talk to each other like we all went out and grabbed a beer and whatever? And it's okay. It's okay if one person has the beer and thinks John Fetterman's a bitch, and the person down the aisle thinks he's like standing up for everybody should be shaking the president's hand, and
they did not go to shake the president's hand. They did
Fetterman
not go.
Did. That's why
they usually do. They usually line up on either side, right? At the State of the Union, and this time, no Dems.
Yeah, but the controversy was about Fetterman did. Fetterman did shake.
That's why we asked the question, because Ethan had put up a reel that like went viral, right?
Yes,
Just for the fact that Fetterman did something that's like a formality that we've done for 250 years, but none of the Democrats except Fetterman did it, right? That's why we asked the question. Most people probably didn't even know. I don't even know why we chose that as a subject line, but to Sean's point, it's like, okay, you think he's a bitch, that's okay.
Well, I mean, and it's kind of fun. Like, you can laugh at that. And again, it's vulgar. It doesn't follow our etiquette. And we wouldn't publish that on IVN, right? But
we'd only talk about it on our podcast.
We only talk about it on the
Facebook
podcast.
page.
We only refer to it to our podcast. Fetterman is such an interesting case of one of the few Democrats in Congress that are willing to kind of be that more center voice right now, more willing to compromise with the other side on issues like voter ID. He's in favor of voter ID because he understands a majority of Democratic voters even are in favor of voter ID. It's an 80-20 issue.
Yeah, it might not help him in the primary, but it does help him with the electorate. So if he thinks...
Yeah. He just stands out in a party that's all about institutional homogeny. Like, you have to check off XYZ on the list to be the right Democrat, or else you'll get crucified, as Fetterman was.
Those people usually don't get to stay, like Manchin and Sinema and...
Yeah, a lot of them end up leaving, and like in Manchin's case, he re-registered as an independent, which means now in West Virginia he can't vote in the primaries. And why he's become an ally now for the reform movement is because now he's seeing the other side, right? And so having more people like Fetterman
and
Manchin
anymore.
Yeah, having more people like Fetterman and Manchin is helping us drive the independent conversation, because at least those people are there to provide that more independent perspective.
And there's Republicans still there. We go back to point out, we've talked about this before. Jane Nelson, the Secretary of State, is I don't want to put words in her mouth, but she's a Republican. I think a very proud Republican. She's always been elected as a Republican, but she's one that's like, okay, the AG is going to drop this. The AG is not going to fight this closed primary effort. I'm going to, because I'm the Secretary of State.
I wonder what she did with this lawsuit. Is she the?
They're de facto defending it, right? I think they're in as the interested party in the case, and that's what I mean. Jay Nelson, has stood up and said, "I'm going to defend the laws of Texas. I'm going to vote the voters of Texas." The Republican Party has no private right to go and change state law. So if the Attorney General wants to take the side of the party over the state, well, then I'll step in for the state.
Yeah, funny enough, Nelson is doing Paxton's job right now.
Yeah, literally.
Yeah, literally doing his job.
And maybe
I just can't get over how Paxton is a candidate in the election. If that's not a conflict of interest.
Well, I mean,
he's on the ballot in Dallas County, right? He's a statewide candidate.
We see this all the time, where secretaries of state will run under a party in a campaign for their own, and they'll oversee their own election or re-election, or they'll go and try to run for another office like governor or Senate or something else, and they'll oversee their own election. That's a part of the way the system is.
He's trying to figure out how to have fewer people probably vote for the candidate that he doesn't, he wants to run against one candidate, not another candidate. He's got a total agenda, political agenda. So how can it be that he is able to, I don't know, manipulate everything at this level?
Well, so, I mean, to that point,
why does he get standing? I mean, maybe he's the one who does have standing because he is a candidate in the race.
But I mean, again, this is getting into that, the conspiracy theories of all this, and because like you look at who Paxton may go against, whether it's Crockett or what's his name, James
Talarico.
I can't believe you don't know his name. He's everywhere.
I always have a hard time with his last name. Anyway, so and you look at those two opponents and you think, well, wouldn't Paxton not want to face Talarico if what we're saying about him being popular with independents, and we know there's over 2 million independents at least in Texas,
and a ton of them voted for Talarico yesterday.
Yeah.
A ton of them. That's
but I'm sure his calculus is that he's not going to get Crockett by letting those ballots in, and he's going to get more attention by doing all this stuff, right? But I mean, what you're pointing out is one of the other, situation we have when we have this partisan-based system, even in an open system. There's an incentive for each party to have the worst, I shouldn't say worse. I should say the most partisan of the other party get elected, because then that makes their general election easier, right? And in this case, Paxton wants to face Crockett. And if Crockett got through or gets through, she wants to face Paxton, right? And then, so for the very reason that each of them want to face basically the worst candidate from the other party to face the general election. And in the context of, being able to speak to the general electorate.
Right. Which, I mean, the parties use this very thing to say, well, see, this is, there's crossover voting, right? This, like, the voters are thinking about this. So you have Democrats trying to infiltrate the Republican primary and try to get a weaker candidate elected, or Republicans will do that to Democrats, when in fact, a lot of these party insiders are saying the very thing that they do. They make the case that voters think the way that party operatives do, when they don't. Voters just want to vote for who they want to vote for, which is why, like, this excuse of crossover voting as a reason to close the primaries. Crossover voting doesn't happen, not especially not to a degree to affect an election. So
it happens with independents, though, right?
Well,
they're the ultimate crossover voters.
Well, right. But independent voters will pick a party's ballot based on who they want to vote for. Like, that's all voters want to do, is vote for a candidate. They want choice.
Exactly.
That's what they want.
I think independent voters are like T-ball players. My son just had his first T-ball game yesterday.
Good job.
You know what? Some of those T-ball players, they go up there, they hit the ball, and they run to third base, because they're like, nope, I'm not running to first, I'm running to third. Some of them, they're like, I'm not putting my glove on my hand, I'm putting it on top of my head, right? And that's the thing about independent voters. Just like T-ball players, they're unpredictable, and they're going to do what they want.
Very good. Very good.
Okay.
And we should have systems that allow them to do what they want, because
that's right.
Should be just as free as the rest of us.
You should be able to put your glove on your head, right? And you should be able to complain that you haven't gotten your snack yet.
And speaking of elections and letting people do what they want, Sean, did you want to talk a bit about the FEC and the wild west of campaign finance, like you wrote about this week? What's going on there?
Yeah, in my Reform Roundup, I mentioned that towards the end of February, it was reported that Trump had finally nominated 2 new people to the FEC after 10 months of the agency essentially being shut down. Now, for those who don't know, the Federal Elections Commission, the FEC, is in charge of enforcement of federal campaign finance laws and federal election laws. Now, mostly election laws fall to the states. There are some examples of federal laws, which is why mostly this has to do with campaign finance.
So this board is completely unmanned for the last 10 months without...
Well, there have been 2 members, but because there's only 2 members, it hasn't lacked quorum. Now, there's supposed to be at least 4 for it to have quorum. A total of 6.
Really like 6, right?
Yeah, it's a total of 6 members that are evenly split between Republicans and Democrats, which in this hyper-partisan environment that we find ourselves in, we've seen an increasing number of deadlock decisions. Even when the FEC isn't shut down, they can't do anything because Republicans will accuse Democrats of trying to weaponize the agency. Democrats will accuse Republicans of not trying to enforce federal campaign finance
And
law
they'll
strong
both
enough.
get what they want. They'll
And they'll
both
both get their
exactly
want, which is inaction, right? They're
Yep.
not moving against their own candidates. So if anyone's interested in who's regulating the huge flow of cash in the 2026 midterms, we've already seen billions of dollars injected. Who's
Billions.
regulating this? Who's overseeing this?
And
the answer is nobody.
Forgive the excessive baseball analogies, but if you're listening to this, right, and you think about, okay, what is this? How do I compare this to normal life? Just imagine if you go to the baseball game, and at every baseball game, the teams on both sides have to say, okay, who's gonna be the umpire, right? Somebody from my team or somebody from your team? Who's gonna umpire first base? Somebody from my team. And you say, where is Major League Baseball putting in an impartial umpire, right? And it doesn't. We don't have that. I think that's the problem. There's no impartiality. It's just, oh, okay, well, we'll have two umpires, one that really wants to call a strike every time you throw a pitch, and then we'll have another one that'll call it a ball even if it's right down the middle of the plate.
It's the same thing as the Supreme Court right now, right?
Yeah, I mean, I just think it's because we know if there's one reform issue that most voters can agree on, it's that there's too much money in politics right now. And when you look at the huge flow of cash going into and out of campaigns, political action committees, the political parties, and you have to ask yourself, well, somebody has to be overseeing this. Well, no, like it's basically just an honor system right now against people who are more than willing to act dishonorably.
But to be fair, all the people in this space are very honorable.
Yeah, of course. And Judas is an honorable man, right? It's
now we're going to get all religious.
Yeah, we're getting all religious now.
Or Brutus. Actually, I was thinking of Julius Caesar, but anyway,
that's Brutus.
Yeah.
A2 Brutus.
A2, yeah, the names rhyme. Anyway, so
they should call us independent philosophers on here.
That's right. We talked about Marcus Aurelius. We're talking about Julius Caesar.
Theory. The theory of theories.
The theory of theories.
We double theory.
Speaking of theories.
The Odyssey movie is coming out soon, directed by Nolan. That looks pretty good. Way off topic, but
you think it'll be better than the Attack of the Killer Tomatoes Organic Intelligence?
No, absolutely not. No, Killer Tomatoes. Right? That's peak. That's peak. You can't get any better than that.
And,
I love that.
And so, like, if anyone's wondering if these nominees will be confirmed in time, probably not. You know, probably it'll take weeks and months. Yeah. The funny story about the last person who was nominated, which was, or at least the last Republican. How do you know all
this stuff? How the heck do you know all this stuff? Like,
it's just an encyclopedia of knowledge just up here. But the last Republican that was nominated by Trump, it took 976 days for his confirmation. So I wouldn't expect to see the FEC go back.
In Trump's defense, this is why he needs a third term.
Oh, for heaven's sake. Okay, can we talk about ranked choice voting in Los Angeles? Because I got very excited about this when I saw this week. And I know that it's sort of like, it seems like it might be a long shot, but is it potentially going to go on the ballot in LA?
It's possible. So yeah, the Charter Reform Commission, very much the same way we saw in New York City, right?
Okay.
So LA also has a Charter Reform Commission that meets probably annually, and they recommended, along with other things like expanding the size of the city council to 25 members for a city of 4 million people, which I think makes sense. Reasonable, right? Along with that, they recommended that the city adopt ranked choice voting for its elections.
So cool. Is it like the proportional representation kind, or what kind of RCV is it?
So the city council didn't get into those type of specifics, and so I think now you can have a conversation exactly what method of ranked choice voting is right for LA, a city as large as LA, a city that, unlike New York, has a nonpartisan primary election system which any voter can vote in. So yeah, it's the perfect combination if we can agree that they do the right type, of system for a city like LA. And IVP has done polling on this, polled LA County voters, showing that most over 60% of county vote or independents would support a system of a nonpartisan primary advancing 5 5 candidates to the general
Right.
election using
Is
And it's
that
ranked choice
what
voting.
they're proposing?
Well,
No, that's not.
there's not a specific on
yeah.
the ground yet. I mean, there's
Yeah.
a lot of
Okay.
really good people that I know have been pushing that for a very long time, and it's a big
Nice.
win. But to be fair, the question we've asked is a simple question. Would you rather have 5 instead of 2 choices in the general election and be able to rank those, right?
Right.
And you
Yep.
see, when you just put it
Everybody loves that.
when that's the question, you're going to start with like, 2/3 of the voters, right? Some of them undecided, and then you're going to have the people, I don't want to change anything, right? But, the question there you go is in the devil in the details, right? I don't think they're going to do what New York did because New York already had closed primaries, right? And then just did it in the primary. So maybe
Right.
will they follow, San Francisco and Oakland that eliminated the primary and then have a lot more elongated ballots? Will they look to Alaska, right? Independent Voter Project has said, look, the easiest thing to do is maintain what you're doing right now. Just simply advance a few more candidates. It could be 4, it could be 5, right? But just that small part that really makes a very little change in the administration process. Just give people more choices when there's more than twice as many people participating, right? It moves the importance of the
It's
primary
incredible.
election. Right.
So cool. I hope it happens. I mean, it seems like a little fast, but these things do happen fast when there's some political will behind it. And maybe people are seeing how great it would be, if we had it right now in the California governor's race or in,
yeah. It just totally changed the dynamics. You see a lot of people frustrated about, okay, well, it's getting late in the election. I guess this is the candidate field and stuff. Why? The election's in November. Why is everybody like, okay, well, the election's going to end for most of these people right now? I mean, if you're a credible candidate, why does the randomness of who jumps in the race and the randomness of whose name ID is highest over a year before the election happened determine the outcome of these races where you're not getting close to 50% of the primary electorate to advance, let alone 50% of what would be the general electorate. That's
Yep. So I'm working right now on an article about the voter ID bill that's in California versus the voter ID bills that are running through Congress. And I'm not finished with the article, but there's huge differences in these two bills. And so I just was wondering, did you guys realize not all voter ID bills are the same at all?
Well, no, I mean, Kara, to your point, and so we're not being partisan. The one in California was brought by a Republican, and the one in Congress that's being pushed is obviously being pushed by the Republicans. But they're very different, right? And
they're very different. And there's actually 3 or 4 bills in Congress, but they're very extreme, the federal ones, whereas the California one is pretty reasonable, and they're both going to all get painted with the same brush, if that makes sense. People are just going to be either against voter ID or for voter ID, and there's nuances to it.
Well, same with ranked choice voting, right? People are for it or against it. Well, you can be against it if done a certain way. You can be for it if done a certain way,
I
right?
guess so, yeah.
Well, and people will rely on the partisan narratives to push their agenda on whatever those reforms are. So we saw, in the last couple of weeks, both Indiana and Ohio moved to ban ranked choice voting.
Banning it.
And even though it's not used in those states, right? They've never even experimented with ranked choice voting to know whether or not it works for their voters or not.
What
and
are they
just ban it
so
anyway.
afraid of, Sean?
They're not afraid of anything. It's all just for campaign stuff and everything. It's like, okay, well, if you can go ban it, that means then you can overcome the ban, right? It's all posturing, in my opinion. It's just political posturing.
Well, with Ohio,
no one's actually going to really. I mean, they really did go so far as to ban it, but you're saying it's more of a message bill, and that makes a lot of sense. Chad, I hadn't thought about it that way.
With Ohio, that's 20 states now that have banned ranked choice voting.
Wow. Okay, so I mean, really, what is so dangerous about ranked choice voting that these people are so afraid of?
These are all Republican states, but here in California, maybe they'll be able to do something in Los Angeles, but just to show how nonpartisan it is, well, then why isn't it being advanced more rapidly in Democratic states?
because the Democrats don't want it either.
Yeah, it has nothing to do with the partisan. It has to do with the incentive structure, which, oh my gosh, you would have to talk to people outside your narrow base that are going to, believe all of your rigid philosophy. And we aren't succumb to this, lesser of two evils type view of elections.
Yeah, I mean, I can guarantee you that Democrats and Republicans, they don't like the idea of, say, like Newburgh, New York, now reaching a settlement in a voting rights case to use proportional ranked choice voting in their city council elections because the city was sued over a lack of representation and choice for Black and Hispanic voters in that city.
So they are going to have to use it now.
Well, yeah. And so part of the settlement was moving to a proportional ranked choice voting system, which allocates seats based on level of support. And this is not the first time we've seen this.
Not the first time.
We covered this on IBN too. East Point, Michigan also did this. And there was a documentary short film about it.
Maybe that's how I know about it, because, it's pretty geeky.
Yeah.
But...
Yeah, and I mean, what's interesting to me is that we are starting to see, legal institutions like the DOJ in case of East Point, the Department of Justice in the case of East Point, but also the courts and the legal process in New York see reform as a remedy for voting rights disputes and for violations that people see, whether it's a state voting rights law in the case of New York or federal like Voting Rights Act in the case of East Point. But you're starting to see a growing sense that reform is an avenue to settle these disputes and violations.
Very cool. Very cool. So the wealth tax is going to be probably on the ballot in California. And we have just published on Independent Voter News the next bit of our series, How It Really Works. So this one's about the California Billionaire tax, and I encourage everybody who's listening to check it out. We talk all about what it is, who's for it, who's against it, what it could possibly mean for the tax base in the state of California if it passes.
Right. And I think it comes down to a lot of it is, I think most of us can accept that, the wealth inequality has grown quite substantial, right? The question is this the way to do it? And is this actually going to be good for the voters, right? I encourage all of you listening, come to your own conclusions, but don't just jump to a conclusion without really understanding what is the wealth tax, what does it do, what is the implications, what are the long-term and what are the unintended consequences, right? And so
and how are the political parties going to try to manipulate you to vote one way or the other?
Exactly. They're both going to this is exactly what they're doing. If you're listening to this and you think, okay, how do these things happen, or how this is exactly how it happens. Okay. They wrote the bill. Okay. They're putting people on the side. Then they'll hire a consultant. The consultant then will hire a pollster. That pollster will go out and they'll do focus groups and they'll do polling and they'll find out what is that one or two best lines to convince you, not to explain to you, not to tell you why it's a good thing, but what will pull at your emotions the most to support or oppose something, right? And then they'll just say that, hammer it over and over and over, and then you'll get ads over and over and over, right? But in that process, there's zero effort to educate you, right? So it's all about grabbing the top line and then just shoving it down people's throats. So we encourage voters. I think whether you support it or against it, we encourage everybody just really understand it more and understand that it's not just about what you want to accomplish. It's about what is actually going to happen when that passes. And that's why we write articles like this. And Kara, I think you did a fantastic job. Ethan, I think you did a pretty good job on the image that goes along with the article. I thought
that's good,
funny.
Ethan. Well done.
And for once, I don't have to give Sean credit for anything.
Aw. But who you do have to give credit to is we got to do a shout out to our friends at Open Primaries for their activity and and Sean, you wrote about that, right? They did a Declaration of Independence.
Yeah, so they've released this kind of sort of Declaration of Independence on America's 250th birthday, or 250th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration, the original Declaration of Independence. And this one is just sent out to independent voters, calling for equal treatment in elections, whether that's taxpayer-funded primary elections, whether that's media coverage, polling, and debates, right? Just equal treatment, because the disenfranchisement of independent voters in the U.S. political process extends beyond primary elections, right? We talk about closed primaries a lot, how millions of independent voters are shut out of these critical elections. But a lot of people don't know, say, like in a state like New York, you have to be a registered member of a political party in order to be an election judge, to work as an election administrator.
To judge an election, you have to demonstrate your loyalty to a political party.
Isn't that fascinating?
How absurd is that?
It's fascinating, though. It's just like this stuff is so ingrained that like what we're trying to do is we're trying to shine light on it, but also disentangle it.
I want to know why. Yeah, I want to know why. Okay, we're sometimes thinking that we're the crazy ones out there doing this silly reform stuff and everything. I go, but just ask somebody, like anybody, a Democrat, a Republican, an independent, just a common person, say, are we the crazy ones to say that election judges need to join a political party in order to judge
just
an election?
Work at a polling location, right? You have to be like, it's insane.
Alice in Wonderland.
And so
you're a whack job, Sean.
I am a whack job.
You should have independent judges.
Yeah, that I believe in, that a system should be incentivized to be nonpartisan is crazy. And
we haven't even gotten to the Olympics. Speaking of judges, but I think we've gone pretty long on time. It's about that time to get the side.
You have been on a whole bunch of podcasts, though, right, Chad?
Yeah,
people calling your name out there.
We're on State of Gold. I just got on a one to organize a podcast with a bunch of attorneys in New York who do appellate cases and stuff. So that's going to be a fun one. It was on with ABC. This was great at 6 a.m. my time on Sundays. It was a little early. Did one with folks coming from the more Bernie perspective. And then
dedication, getting up at 6 a.m. for Bernie. What?
Yeah, on a Sunday.
And the next, they're 9 a.m. because they were on the East Coast. I'm on the West Coast, right?
Well done.
And then the next day, I did one with the Patriot podcast, right? Where folks obviously coming from a more conservative perspective. But I tell you what, I want to, in the next month or two, get both of them on this show, and I guarantee you'll have a show, and you'll find out that I bet you they'll be friends by the end of the show and talk about how they can. I'll put money on that. I'll go on whatever with all these new wager things.
Or Kalshi.
I'll put on Polymarket and Kalshi. No, they have not sponsored us, but they can if they'd like to.
People made a lot of money on the war on those betting.
Now in the poly market, and now there's this big discussion on whether or not these type of betting systems should be allowed, especially if the question is, will the U.S. bomb Venezuela or Iran, which we saw the same thing happen in Venezuela, right? A lot of people money, or will the supreme leader of Iran be killed or toppled or whatever the question is, right? There are people with insider information who will be able to put in a lot of money going in and get even more money on the back end, because, hey, they may be the ones dropping the very bomb that kills the supreme leader of Iran. So it's
for all we know, right?
For all we know. Yeah.
Yeah.
There was someone that bet $87,000 on the supreme leader being killed about 3 hours before it happened or something, and I think they won $600,000.
Yeah, it's crazy.
They won.
But you know what? Back to the podcast. IVP's message is going international too. You were on a podcast based in Australia, right?
Yeah, Australia, Canada, CBC Canada, right? Yeah. We were on ABC here. CBC is the public broadcasting for Canada.
Well done. We love you, Canada.
Yeah,
we love you, Canada.
Well, there's not right now. We're in a on and off relationship, it appears right now, from a country perspective, but
it's complicated.
It's complicated.
Yeah.
If it was a relationship status on Facebook, it's complicated.
We're not going to bring snacks and hand them over the fence to our neighbor right now. So, but,
make sure that John Palmer knows that we're very happy that he wrote a great piece in Independent Voter News about top 5 elections. Thank you, John Palmer.
We love John Palmer. In full disclosure, he helps represent the independent voter on the board of the National Association of Nonpartisan Reformers, which is still kicking, and I think is a lot of the reason why reformers are really starting to work together more. But that's in part because of folks like John Palmer. So thank you. Shout out to John.
And everybody read his piece. Go to Independent Voter News, and you can find our podcast. You can subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, wherever you get your podcasts. Make sure you share this episode with a friend. You can follow us at Independent Voter on X. You can also follow us on Instagram at Independent Voter. And Instagram's going really well, right, Ethan?
It is. We're getting lots of views on there, lots of traction, people engaging.
Ethan's doubled it in the while he's also working on a very cool redevelopment of the IVN website. He's still getting some videos out there going viral, but who says the younger generation doesn't like to work?
Oh my God, they work.
Exactly.
They can do so many more things at once than I can.
I mean, I'm not sure he'll ever be able to do the amount of things I can do, but I mean,
I don't know.
we can't all be at the upper echelon.
Ethan's running around us. Thank you so much to Lena too. We love you, Lena. Thank you for being our faithful producer of the Independent Voter podcast.
She actually is my favorite Colombian.
Aw. Well, okay, so till next week, huh, guys?
Yes.
Yeah, thanks everybody, and
right,
that was
bye.
a very long sign off. Bye everybody. This is the Independent Voter Podcast, sponsored by the Independent Voter Project and produced by Olas Media. Remember, you can always find the Independent Voter Podcast or the How It Really Works series at ivn.us. Follow and subscribe at olasmedia.com.
Olas Media.